got into advertising quite by chance. Well, way back in 1997, I think it was. I just finished my A-level, and it was one of those random, wonderful moments where you're just sitting around wondering what to do. And one of the few times I actually listened to my mother when she said, go meet this lady at Grants. And that was the beginning of what is now, I think, 23 years. In that, I've done everything from relaunching airlines to supporting magnificent sort of, these titan sort of brands, as well as launch little boutique brands that have grown to be significant. So I think that if I were to look back, there have been many successes. But the real standout for me has been how much I have learned about, so many different subjects and so many different people and so many different areas. And in doing so, how much we have really learned about what makes this country tick, what makes us unique, what makes us just like other people in some other ways. Started off as a pitch. Right. So the whole aspect of that pitch, and it was so clearly articulated, was how do we make Sri Lanka win in the digital age? So we started from there. It was clear what the island was. It was clear how the positioning of our destination was going to happen in terms of the product itself. But how are we going to take a destination product or a destination, as it were, and turn it into a destination brand in the digital age? So we started with data. We looked at what were people saying. We looked across the markets. While we hubbed all of the thinking out of Sri Lanka, we worked with extended teams across the world, out in the States, out in Europe, the Middle East, in China, in India, to really understand the conversation around Sri Lanka, but equally the conversation in the digital age about traveling. Why were people traveling? How were they traveling? So how were they consuming destinations? And then how were they also engaging in communicating them? So what did it have to work as a hashtag? How did it work in user-generated content? How would you consume and amplify the experience of a destination? But we're not unique for just one reason. We're unique for our food, for our beaches, for our mountains, for our tea, for our people, for our cricket. Sri Lankan cricket is so much, different to, say, Indian cricket or to British cricket. How do you then take everything that we have to say about all of the different aspects that make up Sri Lanka and the experience of it, and still communicate it in a way that is concise, in a way that is inclusive, and in a way that it travels across languages? So that was the real heart of this journey. And then from that, So Sri Lanka was born. And so in a nutshell, it means Sri Lanka is unique, and it is unique for myriad of reasons, and that is the heart of this brand. Promotions Bureau pitch. And I think it was also the first time that the private sector and the public sector, specifically the tourism public sector, collaborated on this whole pitch process, because it was a collaborated effort there. Winning Viral Brand Film of the Year was incredible, because we didn't win in the travel and tourism category. We won across all brand films that was entered, up with a way to communicate this brand changeover, right? So it was not so much a destination marketing campaign as a way to communicate that Sri Lanka had new identity, and it was a prelude to a global campaign. Global campaign, of course, was delayed for whatever reason, but this was where it all started. So we were very clear, in this digital age, there was no reason to do TV, there was no reason, and there was no way to justify doing all of that in the absence of an actual global communications campaign. This was to announce the new identity and the new logo. So we worked with our partners, BCW out in London. They're a WPP agency and a partner agency of ours. And we worked with them to try and understand how would we get the most amount of viral value so viral PR value out of, what type of work would we have to create. And these are best in class professionals to try and understand what kind of content we would have to use to really get this story as far and as wide. And that didn't just mean people sharing. It meant how could you get the attention of travel publications, of say just consumer publications even, and journalists and people alike. How would you really create virality for this? And in brainstorming it, we also asked ourselves, how do you create a piece that would showcase the country in a way that it perhaps hadn't been seen before, but at the same time capture the diversity of the offering? And it was this wonderful idea that came out of these brainstorms of showing people Sri Lanka in a way that we actually had nature participating in that almost, because the idea came from nature making the film in some cases. So while that went where it went, in the film you see things like, you see footage that has actually been shot by the animals. The monkeys, for instance, have that entire monkey sequence virtually was shot by the monkeys. And then there were, I think, about 4 other sequences that were actually shot with interaction with the animals themselves. So that was one aspect. So we knew we wanted to do something that people would share. How can we really take this to world-class space? Because Sri Lanka is a world-class destination. At the time, we were named Lonely Planet's Destination of the Year, right? We looked for partnership with people who would give us the best of that. So we worked with Freeborn Media. They are also the production partners for some of Sir David Attenborough's work. They had huge experience and wonderful talent in actually storytelling in this space. So we had expert filmmakers and cinematographers come down and then execute this film for us. Going back to the win, it was important for Sri Lanka that this world-class product was showcased in a world-class sort of way. The execution was important, and of course the result affirms this, because it is a world-class win in competing against all these brands and all these other wonderful viral films that came out last year. It's one of the most exciting moments, because we are at that place where we are articulating our identity, we are articulating who we are, we are coming of age in so many different places or in so many different areas, but at the same time there are so many areas in which we lead the world in a lot of things. So like our cricket, or rather even if you take things like tea or any of the things that are proudly Sri Lankan in terms of what we're taking out to the world. We are at that cross section now where if you articulate our identity and the value of brand Sri Lanka and feed it back into our origin brand and really articulate our origin brand, we are at a point where brand Sri Lanka can add value into everything. It can add value back into our technology perspective, our art, our fashion, our tea, our various other exports. The opportunity lies in unifying all of this into brand Sri Lanka. And brand Sri Lanka is so much more than just our racial identity or symbols like our flag, all important. But what I'm trying to say is that it is we have more depth than that. Our value system, who we are, into say the So Sri Lanka project, we were trying to identify what was it that made our warmth and hospitality so uniquely different. What was so Sri Lanka about the way we care for people? And in filtering that through, we realize that we are nurturers. There are the ability that Sri Lankans have to nurture relationships is wildly interesting. Right? So we built that value into the brand there. So similarly, if we sit down now with Sri Lanka in its fullest potential across the various aspects of the country and the people and the brand and all of that, I think there is a real opportunity to tie that all together in an identity for Sri Lanka. We created a brand asset in terms of the So Sri Lanka film, and we are wonderfully proud of it, because what it showed us was that the architecture and the way this brand was created could support a film like this. It could inspire, because the brand was created first and then the thinking sprung from that. So it could inspire this level of global thinking. It had the power to bring different collaborators on board. So whether you want to bring filmmakers on board, whether you want to bring content creators on board, whether you want for this to be a collaboration between destination brands. So Sri Lanka is an ecosystem for collaboration like that. So Sri Lanka works when incredibly impactful storytelling and impactful storytellers come together. So in that way, the brand's potential and its ability to deliver at that global level has been demonstrated. What is important now, which I'm sure people are doing, what is important now is to actually build from there. Because I know we've had a run of bad luck as a destination in the space of what happened last year and this year and what we're all living through right now. But the fact is that you've got an infrastructure there that can now kick in. A really clear, well-planned, sustained, consistent campaign plan and campaign strategy has to come into play now, because it's one thing to have one film that does incredibly well, and certainly you saw when it won, it was reshared, and then you get views out of that. But views aren't the only thing that this brand is capable of, and it's capable right now of really unifying an industry, giving a strategic perspective to how we build product, how we train, how we build infrastructure around it, how we build policy around it. The brand is created to support all of that. So if we can use that and then execute consistently beyond that, then I think that's where the real potential of So Sri Lanka is. We need right now is to deal with the fact that this is happening to all of us around the world. There is wonderful learning and wonderful support from across the globe for tourism and the tourism sector. And right now, I think the most important thing to do is certainly communicate our health and safety standards and give people the confidence and the credibility around this. Let's face it, the wonderful way in which we've handled the pandemic, and let's infuse the system with confidence. Beyond that, let's use this moment to also restructure how we think and how we sell Sri Lanka. Or when you are only selling a mountain, or you are only selling some culture, that experience is quite interchangeable. No, if I can't go to Sri Lanka, I'll go to some other nice beach. If I can't go to one archaeological site, I'll go to another. But when you make Sri Lanka into a brand, you make that experience of Sri Lanka something that is not interchangeable with other places. So which is why we want to, London will never lose its appeal, or Paris, or any one of these branded cities and brands that live in our hearts. And if you think about how a brand or how a destination becomes a brand, it's most often through its stories. Tell the wonderful stories of Sri Lanka in a way that connects to people, in a way that connects cultures, in a way that is so precious and captures all our imaginations, that it becomes so easy to love the idea of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka must be more than just her heritage, much more than just her beaches or her culture. Sri Lanka must be an idea. What is the idea of Sri Lanka, and how do we take that right across the board, so that we fall in love with what the idea of Sri Lanka is, and then that becomes something that is shareable, something that is, you write books about it, there are movies around it, popular culture builds around it. That is the opportunity we have right now. We've got 3,000 years worth of stories to tell around how we love and how we demonstrate love, and how we fight for love, and how we have stood for what we believe in, how we have adapted. If you look at who we are almost the antidote to loneliness. And if loneliness is one of the biggest things that is, people are grappling with around the world, we become the antidote for that. So we need to build ourselves a brand that has relevance in all of these spaces. What does it mean to have a Sri Lankan brand of courage, a Sri Lankan brand of love?